Hello and welcome on day two of DeepSec 2019. I hope you had a great coffee break and you're all refreshed for our next talk. Quick raise of hands. Who has seen Monty Python's Life of Brian? Okay. Who has seen Saving Private Ryan? Okay, so you're well prepared for the next talk, because if it comes to iOS malware, we are basically, every one of us is Brian, to put it like Monty Python. So please give a very warm round of applause to Michael Burke, Saving Private Brian.
Thank you very much for that great introduction. Thank you very much to DeepSec for having me. It's a great opportunity. We will start off a little bit about me. Michael Burke is my name, obviously. I work for the EU. I'm an external evaluator for their security funding programs. So if you're looking for funding on any security project, come talk to me. I'll give you a bit of advice around that. I also work for Grant Thornton Ireland. I'm in the incident response and the forensics, where I lead in the digital forensics side of things. Former lecturer, had to give that up. What is AGS, you ask? That is the Irish National Police. I'm Garda Síochána. I was 8 years a police person. Very proud of that fact, but I moved on, so now I'm cool again. And I enjoy dabbling in many, many things. This talk is about something I do every day. So this isn't the dabbling part of it, but I love having conversations around security and other things. So, just a quick rundown of what are we going to be talking about today. A bit about iOS, just to cover the basics. A bit about the bad act. So you tend to get the kind of high net worth individuals, the CEOs having these devices, and they don't kind of fit into any other bracket in the security posture of a company. So it can be an issue for themselves, but generally speaking, they do it, it's more secure, they feel better, and you have people like Trump and the like tweeting furiously from his iPhone because it's more secure, that side of things. Luckily, the Secret Service eventually got him to take that up. So a quick word about iOS and how it runs. There's the user level, it's what you see, the beautiful wall garden that you gamble around. And then underneath that is the root level. So that's everything you don't see. There's thousands of operations happening every second underneath the surface. So it's a much deeper level, and it's something that Apple don't really like to let you see. They just want the user experience more than anything else. Jailbreaking. Most of you, again, will be aware of what jailbreaking is. On an Android device, it's called rooting, but on an iPhone, it's jailbreaking. It's essentially breaking down the garden wall of your iOS device. And what a jailbreak generally does is the end goal is to write to what's called the OS volume, so the operating system volume. There's 4 volumes on an iPhone, and the operating system is on a read-only volume that it just basically goes, hey, you only need to use this bit, and it boots from there. So there is a lot of jailbreak detection out there. For example, people do jailbreak their devices. We'll talk a bit about that. But there's definitely some cause for jailbreak detection apps. For example, banking apps. A lot of them do jailbreak detection, so they want to know that they're running on a secure environment. They don't want anyone messing around with their apps or reverse engineering or anything like that. People have tweaked some of the jailbreaks to be able to stop that detection. And so you have anti-jailbreak detection, and then the apps have then, and the banking apps and others have then done counter anti-jailbreak detection as well. So it's a bit of an arms race that goes on. Speaking of which, iOS malware will often to kind of check to see if a device is being jailbroken. If it has already, it'll go, great, fantastic, I'll use that. Cuts your own access to that jailbreak and then hijacks it for itself. One of the ways it does that is it checks to see if there's a path called bin/sh. If it's created, it goes, fantastic, use that. If not, I'll do it myself. So iOS forensics is hard for a couple of different reasons, because you're stuck in this kind of, glass cage of emotion, where you're in this walled garden, it's nice and safe, but you don't have the access you need to detect iOS malware and other kind of bad issues. So, people having illegal images, working against their company and basically misbehaving as well. And it's hard because you don't have that root level access as well. You're just being presented with what Apple wants you to see, essentially. So how do we do it in the forensics world? A lot of the forensics tools out there do something just as simple as iPhone backups. So they just parse the iPhone backup, do it really well. Some of them take a bit extra as well to kind of play around with. So an awful lot can be achieved with those, and I think for the vast majority of cases, it's good enough. If you're a bit more sophisticated on the forensic side of things, you might set up a network communications analysis capability. So there's things like installing certificates that you can basically man in the middle communications from the iPhone back out to the outside world. So you'll see, you know, an awful lot of communication happening in the background, back to Apple, reporting all its, you know, every keystroke that you make in Safari, for example. And it's something that, you know, other browsers do as well, but it's out there. And another option you have, of course, is jailbreaking as well. That depends on the device you have, the iOS version. There is a new jailbreaking exploit out there, which is very good. We'll talk about it at the end, in fact, uses part of this. But from a forensic point of view, it's not ideal. If you're changing the file system, you're changing everything about the phone, so you really have to justify using it as well. So it's also, you know, it's not hard, but you need some technical capability to do it. So what's out there in the field of iOS malware, spyware, stalkerware, and the like? Spyware is what we're going to talk about here is basically, you know, that the kind of malware that monitors you for on behalf of, say, states and bad actors and the like. Exploits are out there. Again, we'll talk about some of those. So that's essentially jailbreaking and others. They're sometimes chained together to be able to allow malware to run. Stalkerware, this was something that was brought up in the keynote, so I'll just kind of build upon that. I won't go over the old ground there, but it is you know, a growing threat out there, particularly in intimate partner abuse and other elements like that. And we'll talk a bit about known iOS malware and campaigns that they're launched in as well. So, where did this malware come from? This is a screen grab from Zerodium. They are a 0 days broker. So you basically come up with an exploit of some description and you sell it to them. They give you up to 2.5 million for an Android zero-click exploit. And then they package it up and sell it off to, you know, other malware developers, to states, to intelligence agencies, and organizations like that. So they make their money back. Everything in red is iOS that they're looking to pay for. So the highest one is 2 million. Pointedly, Android is now at 2.5 million. There are different levels. So, you know, something at the bottom there is Touch ID bypass. They'll give you $100,000 for that. So you can see it's kind of getting, you know, there's exploits out there. They don't really have to pay for it. And everything in that kind of brownish is Android. So they're looking for less of those now. And then any OS whatsoever is that kind of blue-green as well. So kind of multi-purpose Swiss Army knife stuff. This is the change log from September. Just again, I thought it was kind of instructive to have a look at this. There's the increase in the Android full chain zero-click with persistence. Again, we'll talk about what that is. There, at the bottom there is decreased payouts for a full Apple iOS one-click with persistence exploit. And that's telling. That says, you know, that these things exist. They're out there. They're in use. They don't really need to pay as much as they used to be able to. You know, it might be getting easier, or they have a couple exploits up their sleeve that they're selling. But they still want to keep their toe in the market as well. And this is the result of one of them. This one's really interesting because this is in the news at the moment. So WhatsApp had a zero-day exploit against them where a firm NSO group, they basically came up with this exploit that worked on iOS and Android devices, so it's not just iOS. But the really interesting thing is that there was WhatsApp is able to obviously like track all the activity on their network, and 1,400 people were targeted using this, and 100 of those people were members of civil society, so journalists, dissidents, and activists. So it goes to show, you know, that it's out there and in use, and in use for illegitimate purposes as well. Having said that, there are official kinds. You can use it for monitoring your child. You can, a lot of us have mobile device management on our corporate phones. I know I do. So my employer has a certain amount of insight into what I do. There's a balance to be struck there. And of course, state security, there are threats to all of us, to the state, from criminals and from terrorists. So the ability to be able to look into the communications of those individuals is important, and it's not something that I disagree with. So spyware kind of gets on your phone a couple of different ways. If your phone is jailbroken, it's a bit easier. Oftentimes it's through tethering, so you're plugging your iPhone into a laptop of some description. There's non-jailbroken exploits. They're a bit harder, often done tethered as well. There's iCloud. We'll talk a bit about that. That's actually, a really easy way to get in. You can do it physically or remotely. And the remote installation. So there's 0-click and 1-click, as I was discussing. So 0-click is something that, like WhatsApp, where you have, you only get a phone call that you might not even see on your phone, and your device is compromised. 1-click is when you get a text message or an email that directs you to a website, for example, and you click through there. It downloads an exploit through Safari, gets out through the sandbox. Other ways of doing it is just asking for permission as well. You're going, hey, can I run this? And some people, if they want it badly enough, they'll click yes. So this is a report from the University of Toronto, Citizen Lab. They've done really, really good work around this. They've done a lot of research into a lot of the malware in cooperation with other parties. This is their top 8 that they found to be out there. Is this the stalkerware element of it? Really, this is the kind of very gray area. FlexiSpy is at the top there. If you go to the website, it was down yesterday. I don't know why. Hopefully it stays down. But here is a little screen grab here. If you're responsible for a child or manage an employee, you have a duty to know. Find out the truth, spy on their phone, tablet, or computer. All right, and then in the fine print, very hard to read down the bottom, so I might read it for you. It is the responsibility of the FlexiSpy user to ascertain and obey all applicable laws in their country in regard to the use of FlexiSpy for sneaky purposes. They actually put apostrophes around that. So you can see it's not all in good faith. It's not realistically designed for spying on your child, essentially. This is another one. I'm not going to name it, but it's kind of more out of date, but it kind of gives you a sense of what it's capable of between iOS and Android stalkerware. It relies more on the iCloud side of things. We'll talk about that, as I say. But it still has a good capability there, even though it's running against a much more lockdown system in the walled garden of iOS. This is another one again. It's called mSpy. This is what you can get essentially from having access to people's iCloud. So a good, good chunk of information. This is very valuable for spies. It's very valuable for abusive partners and others, competitors and the like. Things like contacts, browser history, call logs, who you're calling, notes you're taking about things, and Wi-Fi networks. So you can essentially track someone through their usage of Wi-Fi networks, as you're probably aware. This is a little testimonial that I spotted down the bottom. So this is Adam from Edinburgh in Scotland, and he says, "Why did I decide to use mSpy? Simple, I'm not going to sit and wait for something to happen. I read about Amanda Todd and other kids. Seriously, my son's safety costs way more than $30. So I thought, why is Adam in Edinburgh paying $30 instead of sterling, for example? It seemed a bit odd to me. So I did a quick reverse image search. This is Adam. It was taken by a woman who lives in Australia in May 2008, and it was taken in Beijing. So I'll leave it to your imagination if Adam is a real person or not, but I don't think so. On the less funny side of things, this is a chart from the Cato Institute. This is the Human Freedom Index, I think, as compared to queries to this, all these different types of spyware that are out there. So you can see that in that country at the top there, Egypt, this is basically a really cheap and easy way for states to monitor distance and activists and their own citizens. They're paying next to nothing, and they get a lot of capability out of this. So there's 6,750 queries coming back to Egypt, for example, from this kind of spyware, and it's been operated out of their IP space. That's how they're tracking it, and it goes all the way down there to just 3 in Sudan. Not so bad, you say. So the good news is that this kind of stalkerware generally can't run on anything that's iOS 9 or above. So most people are safe from it, from that kind of physical access. However, as I was saying, the iCloud access is a bit easier. You can still operate it up to iOS 13 or 12. Generally, most of them go to 12. But having said that, to be able to install it, if iCloud isn't on the device, you have to set it up. If it is, you need 2FA access. You need access to the device. So you need kind of to get hands-on, which isn't unlikely in a lot of these cases as well. So you're going through a border, or your partner has access to your phone, or that kind of thing. So again, who targets who? Obviously, nation states are very much involved in iOS malware and spyware and stalkerware, using it for their own purposes, good and bad. You have sophisticated criminal actors. There's gangs out there that spy on other gangs. They spy on the police. They spy on their targets. So they're in use all over the place. Spouses, again, in intimate partner abuse, it is a serious and growing issue. You have competitors, so when competition gets unfair, they have an insight into what the other company in the market is doing. And employers, of course, look at what their employees are doing. And in some cases, that's legitimate. So they target journalists, they target non-governmental organizations, dissidents, as I say, business people, whether it's the CEO side of things, or whether it's the lowly employee. They want to see if they're an insider threat, or they're just an abusive employer. Celebrities, poor old Jennifer Lawrence, had her iCloud hacked, with disastrous consequences for her. Again, employees, and of course criminals. Criminals are targeted by this, rightly or wrongly. I think most of the time that's the right thing to do, as long as it's responsible and it's done within the framework of the law. So the malware and the spyware and the stalkerware kind of use 3 main tactics. So they look at iCloud, they look at kind of network-based attacks, and they look at OS and app-based attacks. All of them can be difficult to detect, so we'll have a try. So this is Brian. He's the subject of the talk. He is based on, we do a lot of work for NGOs, and some of them go into very oppressive regimes and have to submit their devices at the border. So they have to basically hand over their laptops, phones, and the like at the border. It gets taken away from them, examine them, not unlike the Cloud Pets talk yesterday. It was very good. And then they get given back. So, in an ideal world, you have kind of throwaway devices that you use to do this, but there has been cases, for example, one of their employees came back from a repressive regime in Asia, and he was afraid of being hacked. His computer was acting very strangely, and his phone was acting strangely, and it turned out that he'd accidentally created an Instagram account where we thought he was being phished. But that's how easy it is to fall into Facebook's grasp, essentially. So Brian's a nice guy. He works with a non-governmental organization. Again, he was stopped at the border. His phone was taken from him. Now he's unsure if his phone is compromised. So what does he do? Can he go about his business? Can he meet his contacts? Can he travel around the country without being monitored? Is he putting his work and his contacts at risk when he's in this country? Is he being tracked? He doesn't know. His private life is at risk as well, and this is a serious issue, because he might hold personal beliefs and behaviors that don't accord with the particular regime, for example. And I remember talking to a gent who works for quite a well-known company, and they operate in the Middle East. When you connected to the Wi-Fi in this particular country, you essentially consent to the terms and conditions to have malware downloaded onto your phone. And that then recorded all your keystrokes and sent it back to them forever and ever. So I said, well, what happens when they leave the country? He says, not my problem. you know. So this can be used, you're feeding information back to these countries, and it can be used to blackmail you at any point in the future as well. So his options at the moment, he can assume he's compromised, turn around, go home. He can go about his business and just, you know, say, well, look, I'm compromised, I'll leave it in the hotel, I'll go meet people without it. He can presume it's not. He can say, hey, do you know what? They looked at my phone, they downloaded the information, but they didn't leave anything behind, you know? So he can just move on with his life. He can check it manually, we'll talk about that, and a couple of techniques around that. Or you can bring it to a specialist digital forensic lab like my own. So this is really realistically not an option if you're in an oppressive regime, and something you'll have to wait for until you get home. You can download some software off the internet. Why not? Yeah, you can try anything. There are a couple of options out there. I don't have anything to say for or against. Certo essentially looks like you make an iTunes backup, it scans it and tells you if it's been jailbroken, for example. Lookout, however, do really good work in this. Lookout are a security company that specialize in particularly iOS and Mac, and done a lot of research around this, so my thanks to them. You can download an app though from them, and it'll tell you if it thinks that you've been compromised by certain types of iOS malware as well. So having said that, there is a lot of advice there. If you say, hey, you Google, is my iPhone infected? You're going to get a lot of disinformation. So you're going to get like, oh, is it overheating? Are you receiving strange text messages? None of this really happens with iOS malware, well-designed ones anyway. Worse, you have, that's impossible, can never happen, don't worry about it, That's dangerous advice in and of itself. As rare as these things are, if you're innocent enough, you might believe that. Worse again, some of the advice is just designed just to panic you into downloading more crap off the internet. A word about persistence. Some of the advice is actually right. Just reboot it. That actually gets rid of a good bit of iOS malware. It doesn't have the persistence. But as we saw with the Zerodium chart, they do pay for persistent exploits as well. So a lot of them do have methods to continue the surveillance after you've rebooted. And some of them have the capability to survive a reboot as well. One of the big things with that persistence is just basically, once they have an exploit going, they can keep hold of all your iCloud and all the accounts that are associated with your keychain on your device as well. So they will keep access to your Gmail and other accounts out there. So realistically, we'll talk about that, but even if you reboot, the problem isn't over for yourself. Manual examination. We have, I'm not going to go into the top two. They're just ways of improving your ability to manually examine it. You do need a bit of experience using them, but there are profiles with the configurator that will allow you to pull out much more information from an iPhone. And a really easy way of doing it is actually just plugging your iPhone into a Mac and looking at the logs that happen in real time. Again, you need to have a bit of experience around that, but it is possible. And then the human eye, which we will talk about now. So you break it into a couple of streams about, what are the attack surfaces there. You have the man-in-the-middle attack, you have your iCloud attack, and then you have the on-device stuff, so the OS and the apps and the like. So how do we detect them all? Well, we start simple. The simplest way you can do this is you just check what version of iOS you're running. For example, it's currently 13.2.3. If you are as fanatical about updating as I am, you'll be running that. And sometimes it updates in the background if you have it set that way. If you're running any less than that, you have to ask yourself why. And if you go to check for an update, and it doesn't show you anything more recent, then you have a problem. A lot of the malware out there will stop you from updating to maintain persistence that it has. You can go into general, about, and certificate trust settings. You can see if you recognize all the certificates in there. The more recent malware can install trust certificates for itself so it can communicate behind the scenes. If you don't have a VPN configured, you shouldn't have a VPN configured on your phone either. You can have a quick look at your apps. So again, do you have a profile in your device management? That's how to look at it there, settings, general device management. I do on my corporate phone, I don't on my personal, obviously. It's just a way of me being able to get access to my corporate email securely, so all the certificates are in there. You can review all the other apps, so you can look at their granular permissions. You can say, hey, what has access to your network data, what's using your battery. You can see that really, really clearly, particularly in the later versions of iOS. You can see what has permission to your location. And a quick and dirty way is just look for Cydia in Spotlight. So you pull down Spotlight, you search Cydia. Cydia is like the jailbroken version of the Apple App Store. So it's really good, but it shouldn't be on your phone unless you put it there. Looking at your iCloud, it's easy to forget because it's in the cloud, but you can navigate into the settings again. You can see what's syncing with your iCloud, and often, you know, the default is basically everything, maybe apart from the keychain and a few other things. And you have to ask yourself, do you need all that? Because I'll show you there is an issue with that. But you look me up, to see what apps have permission to view your account, check your Apple ID menu, see what devices are signed in. That's important. Go to Find My, look for people who can see your location, go to passwords and security and see what trusted numbers there are. So your backup numbers, what you're going to get 2FA codes to, for example. You should recognize all those. If it's safe to do so, so you're not in an oppressive regime, go to a browser, log into your iCloud account from a browser. Do you get any prompts? If it's a new browser, do you get a prompt to your iPhone to say, do you recognize this? If you don't, it's going somewhere else. And are all your details correct? So is your name, address, backup emails and the like, are they all present and correct? So how your phone uses data is an important aspect as well. If you don't have a family, you shouldn't have family sharing on maybe. So go into mobile data. If there's anything using your data, you'll see it in there. You'll see lots of apps using your data, actually, and an awful lot of it. At the very bottom, there's reset statistics. Make sure that's, you know, well in the past, unless you reset it yourself, because, you know, some malware will say, hey, no, I don't want you knowing about that. This is an interesting one. Go into Settings, Safari, Advanced Website Data, and you'll see essentially hundreds and thousands of websites that have all been visited by your device. It's a bit of a trawl, but it might be worth it, and you'll see basically how much data has gone back and forth to that website. At the very bottom, this is my own one here. I find it odd. I haven't figured out why it's 0 bytes and it's still reporting these websites. And at the very bottom, there's gas.lithuania, which is a very strange website. I was looking at it there. I have to figure out why my iPhone is visiting there and doing nothing. So if you want to help me with that, talk to me at the bar. So moving away from that a bit, just check that your email that you use for your Apple ID is secure. I mean, this is probably the #1 cause of compromise that I see, is people reusing passwords and those credentials circulating in the dark web. So just have a quick check of the email that you use on Have I Been Pwned or other websites like that, to see if there's any breaches that involve it. And then have a look at your email, see if there's any password reset attempts in the past. You know, you can just search for that. Realistically, if someone has access to your email, they're not going to let you see that, and they're going to delete those or send them off elsewhere. There's a couple of easy wins. If you scroll to the bottom of settings and see developer, you're in serious trouble unless you put it there. And then the apps there that you see, CheckRain and Cydia, again, they shouldn't be there unless you put them there. You can hide those a couple of different ways. You can get rid of the Cydia app, but you know, a really easy way is just to put it in a folder and just hide it behind a whole lot of other apps as well. There's plenty of ways out there. So that's a quick run through of how you can do it manually, so if you don't have access to anything else. So we'll ask Brian, is Brian happy with everything there? You know, has he's gone through all this and is he now happy to go about his business? No, he is not. Okay, Grant. So we're going to go the easy way, all right? We're going to basically contact myself, Grant Thornton, message me. I'll send instructions. We can arrange a channel to communicate over and to transmit information. You're going to encrypt that and you're going to send it to me, okay? So what am I going to ask you to do? I'm going to ask you to do a sysdiagnose, all right? Anyone heard of sysdiagnose? No? really interesting, really important kind of tool that's in use on iOS and Mac OS devices as well. It's Apple's built-in diagnose and you know, trouble-solving kind of way of doing things. So go into settings, privacy, analytics data. After you hold down volume up, volume down, and the power button at the same time, you'll feel a really distinctive click. And wait a minute, you navigate to that, and then we have root, essentially. So you're using Apple inbuilt tools to diagnose Apple problems. So it's running at root level, and it's pulling back a huge amount of information. It's also pulling back an awful lot of stuff in the folder there as well. So this is, you know, it's kind of boring to look at, but it's really interesting from a forensic perspective because it goes back years, all the error logs, all the updates, force resets and the like. It's really interesting, and you can kind of stumble across some great stuff if you're doing an investigation. There's also Jetsam events, which are, what are they, you ask? They're interesting because there's how Apple regulate RAM allocation. So if you have something particularly heavy on RAM, it'll shut down everything in the background, and it'll tell you what it shut down in the background as well. So you can see what was running at any time that, you know, there was heavy system usage. So right at the very bottom, normally because it's alphabetical, is the sysdiagnose. What's in there? This doesn't look too bad. Perfect. It doesn't look too much, but there's actually a huge amount of information there. There's about 200 megabytes of information in there, really tightly packed. So this is just one example of it. You have every app that you ever downloaded on your iPhone. You have errors, resets, stack shots. I won't go into too much detail there. You also have so much in there that some Apple engineer didn't know what a lot of this stuff was, and just repeatedly said, I don't know what this is, I don't know what this is, I don't know what this is, all right? So there's an awful lot that goes unexplored in here. So what can we find in that? Short answer, an awful lot. So there's hundreds of relevant data points for what I'm talking about from hundreds of thousands of records. But what do we need to kind of pick out of that? Where is the treasure to be found? We're looking for, again, evidence of man-in-the-middle attacks, iCloud, and OS attacks. So what can we find for man-in-the-middle? Well, anyone heard of a stingray or an IMSI catcher? Yeah, a few people. Basically, they intercept your telephone calls, so they can track you, they can listen to your telephone, you can read your text messages, see what you're visiting on websites and things like that. Really useful for intelligence investigation purposes, but we can detect it using this. We can see evil AP attacks and other Wi-Fi based attacks as well. So again, if someone is intercepting your communications, we can detect that. We can see rogue certificates in use that are being used to communicate back. We can see DNS attacks if someone has changed your DNS. You know, in the most benign circumstances, that's just trying to get more clicks on their ads. And in the least benign statistics, they're monitoring everything that you do. So here's a quick example. This is a really basic example. Actually, there's the DNS, for example, when I'm not connected to the internet. I've just redacted some of it, but this is kind of scattered all throughout it, and we can see if someone's changed your DNS settings. iCloud, you can see the device associated, documents that you have in the iCloud. You can see apps, everything that you ever downloaded on your phone. And you can see backups. If you haven't done a backup, then why are there backups being done? You know, you have an issue there. Someone's backing up for you. Here's an example again. Here's mine. So I've got iCloud there. I've got my iPhone associated with it, and I've got my MacBook Pro associated with there as well. So it very quickly gives you an overview of what's connected to your iCloud account. On the operating system side of things, you can see, again, if you're stopped at the border, you can see if someone tethered your phone, downloaded information from your phone. You can see reboots and restores that have happened. You can see hidden apps, even deleted ones that you have. Jailbreaking, we can see evidence of jailbreaking, even after deletion and reboot of your phone, which normally gets rid of most of the information. You can see snapshots. Snapshots are how, again, it's that read-only OS volume that you can see has been replaced and remounted with partitions. You can see communication with command and control servers. That's how a lot of malware receives instructions and sends this information back. You can see malware memory. You can see errors caused by malware. You can see your phone tracking you. And you can see if it's recording you in the background as well. So here's a quick example again. Like I was saying, there's 4 volumes on an iOS device, and the top one there, what's called disk 0 S1, you can see at the top it's marked read only. After a jailbreak, there's now 9 volumes, which should tell you something, and that same disk now is not marked read only, so they've written to it and now have control of your phone and can tell it to do whatever they want. There's a fortnight of, unfortunately, redacted for privacy system logs, but these are really, really useful. So here, for example, is an iPhone being tethered. I can see the Apple ID of the device that tethered, so I have their email. I can see the name of the laptop that it was connected to as well, so that can tell you a bit. If it's not your name, then you have an issue. And there's more logs, a lot more logs actually, and different types. So the most important ones and the most interesting ones are power logs. They're incredibly granular information that are out there. It tracks every aspect of your behavior to feed it back and to learn from that behavior. So Apple can do a better job of presenting, you know, your choices on your lock screen, for example. And it checks and tracks the system behavior as well. So here's a quick example of what it's tracking, so and how it does it. So it's polling all the time. Out of view there is the apps that are actually doing it, but you can see there that it's tracking using your cell location, your GPS location, your Wi-Fi, what you're attached to. And I haven't figured out what Skyhook is. You normally get interns to look for Skyhooks, but once I figure it out, I'll tell you. Looking at the time, don't have time for a demo. It's particularly uninspiring anyway. Essentially, I have 2 phones. I have this one, and then this one, which has red. Oh, we've lost this, have we? One second. Give it a sec. Okay. Yeah, there we go, we're back. And this one, which has been jailbroken and unjailbroken, which I've kept as red, just to tell me that's dangerous. And it would just show you, again, it runs a Python script, and it says, hey, this one looks okay. This one we have an issue with, need to kind of investigate more. So how does it work in the background? Well, currently not very well. It just simply unzips it. It parses it out. There's an awful lot of different types of file types in there, and Apple-specific ones. So that is a bit of work. It checks it for indicators of compromise and other indicators that have cooked up over the last year or so. There's an awful lot more to do. We have to look at a lot of unusual events in correlation and try and figure out, you know, what's happening and you know, what's a sign of what. I like to kind of consider like trying to start an AV company from scratch. There's an awful lot of behavior that I either don't understand yet or have an awful lot of work to do around trying to correlate that information. So it's all being collated and hopefully we'll work on that there. So, Brian, it's come up clear. Are you happy now? Perfect, great. So he can go about his business and help people. He's a good person, he's helping good people. But having said that, prevention is always better than cure. So for everyone out there in the extremely rare examples that, you know, maybe less so with the stalkerware, if you're targeted with this, there's a couple of really easy defenses. Strong PIN code or a passcode on your phone. Keep your iOS version up to date. On your iCloud side, put 2-factor authentication on it and have a really strong password that you don't reuse across anything else. Use a password manager or what have you. A small help would be not to jailbreak it. It just makes you know that attack surface a bit wider. Vigilance. You know, don't, if you can, leave your iPhone out of sight when you're in certain circumstances. And if you're paranoid like me, you take a gold image. So you take a reference image of your iPhone and assist diagnose, so you can compare that from when, you know, you leave the country, for example, and see what's changed between the two. In the very rare event, as I say, that you were targeted with some of this, my advice would be reboot. Again, it's not 100%. There are persistence mechanisms out there that will survive that. If and when you know, again, your iCloud, you have to consider it compromised, so you have to go change everything, you know, change your password and sign out of all accounts, reset it, and you can then do an iCloud backup and do a factory restore on that. It's not ideal, but it's one way of doing it. And you do have to consider that you've lost all your data already, so you do have to change everything and every account that is associated with that iPhone as well. Again, the cookie monster will eat you. And if you're still not happy with that, they're valuable devices, but you may end up throwing in a lake to get rid of it. So a quick word about Checkmate and Checkrain. It's a new boot ROM exploit from Axiomx. For iPhone 10 and backward, really useful for forensics. It's a very clever thing. It's been made user-friendly by Kim Young Cracks, thanks to them. It's a tethered exploit, but it's very quick, easy, and reliable. I've used it myself for various purposes now. It's not long out, but it's come in handy. And what it does is, even if you don't put in the passcode, it can install an app that then in turn is used to install Cydia, that iTunes one. So as you can see, like once you have physical access and you have this exploit running, there is potential for more. So it can be used for good and bad, I would suggest. Like, you know, if you're able to install an app, you're able to install a hidden app somewhere down the line as well. So this is it in action. It's kind of gets me excited to see the writing across the Apple boot screen, but it shows you what it's doing and how it's doing. It's kind of interesting, and that's what you're left with on the home screen as well. The Checkrain app, which you click into, it installs Cydia, as I say, and then you can have fun with your iPhone. So what I would like to see from the Python script that we're still working on is to be able to help more NGOs and civil society organizations. And so I'd like to get more buy-in, that's why I'm here talking about it, and be able to help more people who are afraid their iPhone is compromised. It's an easy way of doing it and far more effective than manually doing it, and you don't have to return to your home country or anything like that, as long as you communicate securely. Need to learn an awful lot more about everything that's happening in the background and how to code it better as well, to be honest. And there will be an arms race. You have to keep ahead of these malware developers as well. So they'll. It's one reason why I'm not going to open source the code, to be honest, because you don't want people picking through it and seeing how you're doing it. There's hundreds of potential indicators, and they're not ones that I'm going to talk about. So if you want to get involved, I'm happy to talk about it. You can email me there at my company account. Or hopefully we'll meet each other at the bar and we can have a talk about it. And I will take questions and have a fireside chat if any is out there.
Thank you, Brian. No, Michael. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We do have time for 1 or 2 questions. So if you have a question, please raise your hand so I can bring the mic to you. If you're standing up, you have to ask a question. No more questions? Then I think it will be Q&A at the bar.
Yes, exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you once again. Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you all.